welcome everyone today. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I also ask for unanimous consent for Mr. Gosar of Arizona and Mr. Moskowitz of Florida to participate in this hearing for the purposes of questions. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, the Select Subcommittee is holding a hearing to examine the constitutionality of actions taken by federal, state, and local governments and agencies in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the earliest stages of the pandemic, people, including our public health authorities, were scared, understandably. There simply was no data about the novel virus, and many public health experts feared the worst. Accordingly, many countries, including our own, seemingly began to blindly issue restrictive mandates. We were told to shut down society. We were told 15 days to slow the spread. By late April 2020, 42 states, collectively governing approximately 316 million people, mandated stay-at-home orders. These state and local orders effectively mandated social distancing, restricting communal gatherings of families, friends, and neighbors. They closed businesses deemed non-essential from operating. They closed churches, restricting parishioners and congregants from attending religious services. And they closed the schools, restricting the ability for our children to gain an education. They rushed to impose and enforce seemingly arbitrary and unnecessary orders. In Michigan, Governor Whitmer told residents that they could not travel to their in-state vacation homes and ordered stores to stop selling non-essential items such as seeds, soils, plants, and other gardening supplies. In Rhode Island, the governor ordered mandatory quarantining for out-of-state New Yorkers. The governor set up police checkpoints on I-95 to stop vehicles with New York license plates and sent the National Guard door-to-door to search for fleeing New Yorkers in order to enforce the mandate. In California, Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrested a man paddleboarding by himself for violating Governor Newsom's stay-at-home order, an order that included shutting down all the state's beaches, and an order that Governor Newsom would violate himself on occasion. At this time, public health experts did not know if any of these directives would have any impact whatsoever on slowing the spread. However, they knew these orders would be significantly burdensome to the daily lives of all Americans. They should have known that many of these orders likely infringed on people's constitutional rights and civil liberties. These concerns prompted then Attorney General Barr to warn that the Constitution is not suspended in times of crisis. Unfortunately, federal, state, and local governments and agencies continued to enact restrictive policies that arguably ignored constitutionally granted individual rights and liberties. When little information was known about the virus at the beginning, it was hard to determine what was reasonable or necessary in responding to this unprecedented novel virus. But as data changes, so must our decision-making. This, however, was rarely the case during the pandemic. Time and time again, in the face of new evidence questioning the usefulness of specific COVID-19 measures, including lockdowns, social distancing, school closures, and masking requirements, governments refused to adapt or provide an explanation as to why their directives were necessary. Instead, the temporary 15 days to flatten the curve too easily became 1,151 days to infringe on individual liberties, or so perceived by many, many Americans. The 15 days to slow the spread was meant to provide hospitals and communities a one-shot opportunity to prepare for a never-seen-before influx that could cause them to be overwhelmed. Instead, it turned into a seemingly endless cycle of government overreach. Associate Justice of the Supreme Court Neil Gorsuch identified this problem early on in the pandemic. To Justice Gorsuch, government actors have been moving the goalpost on pandemic-related sacrifices for months, adopting new benchmarks that always seem to put restoration of liberty just around the corner. The rights guaranteed to every American under the Constitution should never be put on hold. Patrick Henry, a founding father, once said that the Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It's an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and our interests. Nonetheless, the government pushed the Constitution to its limits. These actions, to Justice Gorsuch, represented the greatest intrusions on civil liberties in the peacetime history of this country. These intrusions were not limited to the actions of state and local governments. In spring 2020, the federal government restricted international travel and later issued an eviction moratorium. The latter, which was ultimately held unconstitutional by the court. Most notably, President Biden announced an executive order to mandate vaccination for Medicare and Medicaid providers, federal contractors, employers with 100 or more employees, and federal employees, among others. These mandates were unscientific, did not consider previous infection, and were most of all unconstitutional. The President never had the authority to issue such a directive. Finally, the Biden administration strong-armed big tech companies to shut down healthy debate in the name of science. We are holding this hearing today to look back, to help prepare for a future pandemic, determine what went wrong, and to recommend how to do it better, to make sure that individual civil liberties are protected even during times of crisis. It's clear that our response to the pandemic failed to protect individual liberties, time and time again. Benjamin Franklin stated, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." I would like to ask for unanimous consent to add Justice Gorsuch's opinion in Arizona versus Mayorkas to the record. Thank you. I look forward to a strong, on-topic discussion today, and I would now like to recognize